They say he dug through the seventh night and never stepped out of the grave again. I've kept that entry sealed in ash-gray linen in the drawer with no label, just a trace of soot on the handle. I am the one who catalogues what should have stayed buried. The ledger keeper of rights no one should speak aloud. If you're hearing this, you've already drawn too close. It always starts with the shovel, not new, not even whole. A rusted thing, with leather worn soft where fingers held too long. Left leaning against the chapel fence, its blade still wet, long after the snow has dried. But it casts no shadow under the moon, not at midnight, not even under lantern flame. I've tried. Once was enough. They used to say a tool without shadow had worked where it shouldn't, had bitten into ground that no longer forgave. There's a spot behind the bell tree where the soil never stiffens, even after the first frost, even after the thaw. When I was a child, I stepped there once, and the earth folded in around my ankle, like a mouth closing. My uncle didn't speak as he pulled me back, just looked at the hole, like it had whispered something. I remember the smell, iron, cold, and something old. In 1789, they nailed a decree to the parish gates. No grave shall be opened on the seventh night, not for grief, not for doubt, not for coin. They called it the seventh soil vigil. Not a law, a superstition perhaps, but those tend to last longer. Because by the seventh night, the body isn't alone anymore. Derek Calloway, gravekeeper, 23 years. Known for clean rows and silent meals, but something shifted that winter. Some say it was the child's burial. Others say it was the way the bells sounded, hollow that week. All I know, he went out again on the seventh night. Same shovel, same missing shadow. But when he lifted it, his breath fogged not from the air, but from the handle. It was warm. You can still touch it if you dare. I keep it wrapped in cloth below this desk. Its rust flakes like ash. It weighs more than it should. It hums faintly if you carry it too far from the graveyard. And it remembers your hands. If you've ever stood too long beside a grave that wasn't yours, just to listen, you'll understand what comes next. He didn't pause. Not when the snow began, not when the bell struck 7. He kept digging. By dawn, the grave was open, the coffin empty, and Derek was never seen again. Now, before we go any further, we do something here, a small rite, before the story deepens. So if you're still with me, I ask, softly, where are your hands tonight? Are they warm, like his were? What soil lies beneath your sky? Some call it the grave dust greeting, a way to know we're not the only ones, still listening through the dark. It's a quiet roll call of the sleepless. Where you are, what hour has found you, how deep the hush has settled. You can turn back now if you wish. Let the grave close on its own, but if you're still awake, I'll tell you what happened when the next grave came due, and how the shovel returned, this time to hands that trembled before they ever touched the soil. Some things never stay buried, especially guilt. They found the shovel on the chapel steps 3 days later. No note, no footprints, just mud where there should have been frost. It wasn't left, it was placed, like someone had finished a ritual they weren't proud of, or hadn't finished it at all. And still, no one spoke Derek's name aloud. The chapel bell was meant to toll only on Sundays. That week, it rang 13 times. At dusk, no rope ever moved. Some said the sound was in the air, like breath caught between 2 winters. Others claimed they saw someone standing by the bell tree. But when they blinked, it was just frost, gathered in the shape of a man. You begin to learn that places keep memory better than people. I remember the first time I touched the shovel after that. I shouldn't have. But I needed to know its rust had deepened. No longer reddish-brown, now almost black, like soot from an old stove, and colder than before, not cold like metal. Cold like stone that's been buried beneath years of forgetting. It no longer vibrated in your hand. It waited as if it knew what it wanted. Was still 6 feet down, if you've ever held something that felt heavier than its shape. You'll understand. You feel your wrists strain before your fingers even close around it. The kind of weight that reminds you don't get to walk away clean. I wrapped it again, but it bled through the cloth. Rust, I thought at first. But rust doesn't stain with that shade of blue. I checked the parish books for Derek's last entry. Nothing. No shift log. No burial ledger. No signature. Just one note in the margin, in a different hand. Do not ring. The soil is unsettled. Watch what they don't record, my mentor once told me. It's what the ledgers leave out that shovels back in. At the bottom of the drawer, I found something older. A folio wrapped in muslin, bound with grave twine. It wasn't supposed to be in my office. Its seal had already been broken. Inside, a faded vellum page. The child was not meant for rest. The shovel bends where she was laid. Do not dig the 7th night, for the silence will remember you. No signature, only a soot print in the shape of a thumb. Watch what they don't record, my mentor once told me. It's what the ledgers leave out that shovels back in. At the bottom of the drawer, I found something older. A folio wrapped in muslin, bound with grave twine. It wasn't supposed to be in my office. Its seal had already been broken. Inside, a faded vellum page. The child was not meant for rest. The shovel bends where she was laid. Do not dig the 7th night, for the silence will remember you. No signature, only a soot print in the shape of a thumb. The villagers say the child hummed. After, not a lullaby, but something like a bell's echo, stretched thin. One man said he heard it through the stone, when he passed too close. Another swears he saw a second shadow following her marker. During the first frost, you might not believe this part, but when I held the shovel again, just briefly, just long enough to reposition it, the frost on the windows melted, not cracked, not fogged, melted, as if the warmth from the 7th night still lived inside the iron. Some call it grave heat. Old grave diggers whispered about it when I was younger, said it came from tools that remembered the dig too well. That the warmth wasn't from friction, it was from memory. The ground sweats when it knows you've returned. That's how they put it. If you've ever gone back to the place where someone stopped waiting for you, you know the feeling. The way the wind pulls at your coat. The way your name doesn't quite echo anymore. That grave still leans, like something inside keeps trying to sit up. And the shovel, it's starting to bend, only slightly. But the curve wasn't there before. Notice what no one does here. Not a single person in the village has stepped beyond the southern gate. Since that night, the iron lock rusted shut from the inside. No one remembers sealing it. No one admits to trying. Even the birds skip it. Would you have opened it? The grave, I mean. On the 7th night, when the bells felt hollow and the snow didn't stay, would you have knelt just to make sure the body was still at rest? I've thought about that more than I should. Because sometimes I'm not sure what I would have found. If I had. And the shovel, it's listening again. Not humming, not trembling. Just still, like it's waiting for the next hand. Or maybe yours. The bell rang again. But not from the tower. It came from the ground. 3 soft tones, muffled, uneven. Like something swinging in a space that shouldn't exist. And then silence, as if the dirt itself had closed its mouth. I was standing near the southern gate that morning. Not for any official reason. Just drawn. The frost had thinned around the child's marker. Only there, everywhere else remained glazed in white. And beside it, resting perfectly still, was the shovel. No cloth, no marks in the soil. Just the tool, waiting. It hadn't bent further. It had straightened, but now the rust had gone pale. Not red, not black, but bone white. There's a phrase I found once in the Northern archives. When the rust whitens, the grave remembers. No one cited the author. No one had to. If you've ever returned to a place you swore you left for good, you know that feeling in the chest. The pause before your foot hits the step. The air heavier than the season allows. I felt that as I bent to pick it up. The shovel was colder now, but not lifeless. It thrummed. Not a sound, but a pressure behind the ears, like memory trying to wake. I held it longer than I meant to. Only realized it when the frost began to pull away from my boots. I should have walked away. Instead, I followed a sound. I never should have heard. There was a hollow beneath the marker. Not a grave. Not anymore. Just a sink in the earth, like something beneath had drawn breath. So I dug 3 times, each stroke more hesitant than the last. The soil came up gray, then darker, then wet. They used to call it the weeping layer. A superstition mostly, the belief that grief seeps downward and stains the earth beneath a grave. And that sometimes it cries back. The rusted blade struck something that wasn't wood, something round, metal, and still warm. A bell. It wasn't large, barely the size of a teacup, but it rang when I lifted it. Once, high, shrill, wrong. And the moment it sounded, the shovel pulsed in my hand. No vibration, No sound. Just heat. Notice how the soil shifts here. It pulled inward. Not as if collapsing, but as if reaching. The dirt didn't fall into the hole. It climbed up the shovel, up my coat, then stopped, perfectly still, half a second too long. I dropped the bell, but it didn't fall. It hung there, suspended in the air above the pit, swinging on a thread I couldn't see, casting no shadow. Just like the shovel, they say there are tools that inherit intent, not memory, not possession, but echo. If a hand digs where it shouldn't, the tool remembers. And if enough hands forget that line, the tool learns to dig on its own. The bell struck twice more, without being touched, then vanished, just gone. No sound of descent, no thud, no imprint in the dirt, and the frost returned instantly, but only over the marker, as if it had never softened at all. If you've ever watched something disappear in plain sight and felt it slip into you instead, you understand what happened next. I couldn't feel my fingers, but the shovel had no trouble staying in my hand. The rusted blade had changed again, no longer white, no longer rusted. Now it was clean, perfectly clean, like it had never touched the ground at all, and for the first time, it cast a shadow. But not mine. The shape that stretched across the snow was too small. Shoulders hunched, arms thin, fingers curled around a bell. A child's shadow, and it did not move when I did. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Could have been until dusk. Only when the frost thickened over the name again did the shadow vanish. But the ground didn't settle. It pulsed, like a bell after its last chime. I returned the shovel to its cloth, tied it with grave twine, placed it beneath the floorboards this time, and placed salt over the seams. But it hasn't cooled since. Would you have stopped after the bell rang? Would you have looked away, left the soil unturned, or would you have kept digging, just once more, just to prove something was still there? That's what I told myself too. That's why I keep the ledger. Some tools remember the shape of your hands, others forget on purpose. The shovel no longer feels like mine. Even wrapped in cloth, I can sense when it wants to be held. Not by me. I don't keep it under the desk anymore. That was a mistake. The night after the shadow appeared, I dreamed I was buried standing up. Eyes open, mouth full of bells, each one swinging to a rhythm I didn't know, but felt in my teeth. I woke to find soil under my nails and the cloth wrap, folded neatly beside me, untied. There's an older whisper from the marshlands west of here, not written, just passed between diggers too tired to lie. If the shovel sings to you, you've already been buried once. They used to bury them with the tools they'd misused, not as punishment, but so they could finish the job underground. I never believed it until last week. If you've ever woken in your own home and found the walls unfamiliar, you know that pause, that second where your breath waits for permission, where every corner looks too still. That's how it felt in the archive room, like something had arrived before me, and move the silence around. The southern gate ledger was open to a page that didn't exist before. Handwritten, new ink, but not mine. 7th return completed. Grave responded, tool acknowledged. No signature, just a curl of rust flaking off the edge of the page. I tried to tear it out. The page wouldn't come. Notice what changes here. The shovel doesn't hum anymore. It clicks, soft, metallic, like a lock that's been waiting for a key. It buried itself with. Every time I move it, something in the air behind me tenses, as if a door's just opened that no one built. I carried it once more. Not far, just to the edge of the frost line. The snow gave way beneath my feet, but not from weight, from recognition. The soil knew. It pressed up against my soles, like a hand from below, not to grab, just to check. If you've ever returned to a place you shouldn't and heard your name spoken in the silence, you know what I mean. It wasn't sound, just shape, like someone whispering through closed teeth. The handle no longer looks like wood. It's grown smooth, gray, like ash hardened into memory. Like it's been held by too many people who didn't walk away. And now, beneath the edge of the blade, there's an engraving. I didn't carve it, but it's in my handwriting. 2 initials, C.T., the child's name, carved into the tool, but not visible unless you angle it toward the frost. Then it catches light. That isn't coming from the lantern. It glows, not bright, just enough to be noticed by something waiting. They used to say the 7th night wasn't about the dead. It was about those who left something behind when they buried the body. Grief that sank too deep, questions that got sealed in the box, guilt with dirt still on its hands. That's what the shovel finds. Not the body, not the bones, just the unfinished work. I asked myself if I still believed. This was just history, just folklore, just the mind turning familiar shapes into faces. But every time I pick it up, I see my own reflection, standing farther away than I should be. Last night I dreamed of a lantern, not mine, smaller, brighter, held by someone waist-high, who walked the perimeter without ever leaving footprints. The bells followed her, not swinging, just shaking, softly, like hands too small to hold still. When I woke, the floorboards beneath my bed were warm, and the cloth wrap gone again. If you've ever told yourself you could control how far something reaches, you'll understand why I haven't sealed the drawer again. Because sometimes, when the shovel clicks, I listen. And sometimes, when I don't hear it for a while, I miss it. I don't think this is about Derek anymore, or the child, or even the 7th night. I think it's about the ones who tried to put it back after it had already been claimed. I think it's about me. They used to say it happened once before. Not in this village, not even in this century. But the pattern always began the same way. A missing name, a buried child, and a tool that wouldn't go quiet. I went to the far stacks of the archive. Not the records anyone's meant to read. The sealed ledgers, the ones with wax that flakes if you stare too long. I opened folio number 29 from the quarantine ledger, half expecting dust. Instead, something warm, just beneath the cover, like the book had been held recently, or never let go. It was a list, not of the dead, but of those who dug them up. Names of the returned. All entries had two things in common: a number by the grave and a symbol beside the name. Not a cross, not a star, just a small uneven spade, always drawn in rust-colored ink. The last entry on the page: D. Calloway, Plot 12S, Tool responded. If you've ever seen your own handwriting in a place you've never been, you know that shiver, because next to his name was a note I don't remember writing. Child marker disturbed. Grave hummed. Second shadow confirmed. If you've ever seen your own handwriting in a place you've never been, you know that shiver, because next to his name was a note I don't remember writing. Child marker disturbed. Grave hummed. Second shadow confirmed. I closed the ledger, but the warmth stayed in my hands. Not comforting, not sharp, just present, like a memory that's waiting for you to sit still. Notice what gets recorded here. Not the burial, not the death, only the reaction of the ground, only what the tool reveals. There's a belief, half whispered by the older undertakers, that when soil is turned too many times, it starts to breathe wrong. Not like a gasp, like a rhythm you can't quite follow. It forgets who belongs on which side. They called it grave lapse. And when it happened, the only way to settle the ground again was to return the tool that started it. But no one ever said what that meant. Return it to where? To whom? Or to what? I looked down at the shovel that night, still wrapped, still glowing faintly in the frostlight. The initials had changed. Still CT, but now etched deeper, with a line through the middle, like something had tried to erase her and failed. I took it to the gate, the southern path no longer iced over, the air warmer near the trees. The soil there breathes now, not loudly, just enough that you feel it if you stand too long. I didn't dig. I just held the shovel over the marker, waited. And when the wind stopped, the ground opened a little. Not enough for a person, just wide enough for the blade. Like it had been waiting. I lowered it in. It didn't fall, it eased downward, like being pulled into something soft and certain. Then the frost returned, and the gate relocked, not with a sound, just with stillness. If you've ever tried to put something back and realized it left a part of itself in you, you'll understand what followed. I walked home with an empty cloth, but my hands were still warm. That night I dreamed of the ledger, not on the shelf, but in my lap. Its pages glowing, every name rewritten, every spade inked fresh, including mine. They say the grave only claims those who interrupt its rhythm, but I wonder if sometimes it just waits for someone to listen, to stop digging and start remembering. I still feel the click, where my pulse used to be, just under the skin, as if something small is turning softly, and the frost near my steps. It no longer settles, only circles. Would you have kept the shovel after the shadow formed? Would you have given it back, or would you have waited just one more night to see what else the ground remembered? The cloth is still folded by the door. I haven't touched it in days, but every morning there's frost around the seams, in the shape of a blade, not the shovel itself, just its memory. I haven't returned to the southern gate. The path closes behind you in ways maps can't follow. But sometimes, when I pass the windows after dusk, the soil shifts slightly. Not enough to see, just enough to feel, like a breath, beneath your feet, if you've ever stood where something ended and felt it hadn't quite finished with you. You'll understand what lingers, the kind of silence that holds your name, even when no one calls it. I still keep the ledger, still write, not for the record, for the ones who come after, and think they're the first to feel the ground breathing. There's a belief in the North villages, not written down, just whispered at doorways, that says, if the frost avoids your steps, you've left something beneath them. Some nights I light a candle, just one. Let it burn near the drawer I no longer open, and the air around it always feels watched, not haunted, not cold, just waiting. Notice what she doesn't say here. Not the child's name, not the man's, only the soil, only the stillness. I've begun to forget the sound of the bell, but not the way it made the ground hum after. That feeling in the knees, like someone else's grief passing through you. On its way out, the shovel no longer appears, but sometimes, in the frost on the windows, I see a curved impression, not quite a shadow, more like a permission not yet revoked. And in dreams, she walks again, the girl, CT, not toward the gate, not toward the chapel, just in circles, quiet ones. Lantern in one hand, bell in the other. Her eyes never meet mine, but she's never far. If you've ever whispered a name and felt the wrong one echo back, you'll know what I mean. Some tools change hands, others choose, and I think this one chose silence. The frost outside my steps still moves in rings, not full ones, broken like the path was walked twice, but not by the same feet. I haven't seen Derek, but I dream less now. Not emptier, just softer, like the earth closed around something, and finally held it still. This is where I leave the page open. No seal, no stamp, just ink that hasn't quite dried, because someone else will pick up the shovel. Someday, not for harm, not even for grief, just curiosity. That's all it ever takes. So if you're listening still, if the frost hasn't touched your doorstep yet, if the cloth beside your bed has started to shift in your sleep, maybe it's time to stop asking what was buried and start asking what came back with you. There's nothing else to do tonight but drift. The bells have stopped. The frost has settled. You're safe now. Sleep well. I'll be here. when the ground remembers again.